Everdark, Episode 103, The Moment Not Seen. Last on Everdark, Christian was able to discover what turned the ghost women into the terrible creatures they were, impressing Kaly greatly, but also draining Christian hugely. The only thing to be done is to go back to Balthazar or bring Balthazar to them. They chose option 2. Now we turn back to Julian and Daemon. Daemon was on the hunt. A smile lifted the edges of his lips. He loved hunting beings that were predators themselves. It added a certain something. He kept waiting to hear Kaly's voice asking him if he was going after one of their bloodline to punish them, get back at them, show them the price for disobeying. But Kaly said nothing. But just in case they were listening, he decided to say something. I intend none of those things, Kaly. I have not decided what to do. It will depend on what she does. All vampires are my vampires. I am king of all, not just some. Even your bloodline are my subjects. Even you are. Julian walked lightly by his side, easily slipping between the guests that now talked too fast and laughed too loudly as the alcohol had loosened their tongues and blown away any inhibitions. Their prey was not among these reckless souls, though. Kaly vampires were always on alert, as if they believed someone was continually looking for an opportunity to steal their souls. Maybe that was true. Kaly had never encouraged warmth or connection between any of their bloodline. Indeed, every Kaly vampire was competing with every other Kaly vampire for position, respect, wealth, and power. Kaly had told him often enough that it was better for civilization overall if everyone assumed the people around them were dangerous. It kept things polite. The Kaly vampire they hunted was very alert. She knew they were there, but she had not left, which was curious. She was a tall, willowy woman with the classic Kaly flaxen hair, the vampire's silver eyes, and a long, narrow face. Her lips were surprisingly generous and a delicate pink. She wore an armless sheath dress of silvery material that matched the paleness of her skin. She stood almost a foot taller than the mare, who was as plump as she was thin. Julian compared them to a bat and a ball over their connection. Daemon smiled. Julian informed him that this was Mayor William Battery. He had been mayor of their city for over 20 years and likely would be for a dozen more. His father, Brent Battery, had been mayor for nearly 40 years before him. So it is a dynasty then? Daemon had asked his fledgling, amused that for all this talk of democracy, it seemed that humans still looked for certain bloodlines to rule them.
More like name recognition. There have been politicians who were dead just before the election, and they were re-elected simply because people recognized the name.
Julian answered. Name recognition. He lifted his eyebrows. That sounds like a very poor way to choose a leader.
It's not a perfect system, I'll give you that. Democracy is messy and stupid, and comes up with the wrong answer some of the time, but it's still better than a monarchy.
Julian grinned at him.
Well, present company excluded, of course.
Of course. Daemon replied dryly.
I'm an American. I'm allergic to monarchies. I mean, we like to look at other countries' royals for gossip and stuff, but not to rule.
Julian explained. The humans may elect their leaders, but I will make sure that things are done properly, Daemon answered. I will give them the illusion of democracy if necessary, but I am king. Julian shook his head.
I don't know if an illusion will work. People will feel something's wrong. Though if you're beloved, well, the people might want to keep you around. Those who want to rule, though, probably won't.
I can deal with them.
Yeah, I know you can.
Julian said, but sounded sad. What truly worries you about this, Julian?
I'm afraid, I guess.
Julian shrugged.
I want a good life. I don't seek power. I'd rather be anonymous and have a good life than be famous and have a dangerous one.
Yet you are hardly anonymous. You're known for your show. For who your parents were, you do not shy away from notoriety. Daemon pushed.
I guess I felt there was a reason for being out there.
As they dodged a cheese tray and another full of practically fluorescent cocktails, Julian asked him,
Why do you want to rule humanity? Hasn't being in the shadows worked for vampires so far?
Damon's gaze went unfocused. Humans are our food source, Julian.
So you want to protect them? Control them?
Yes. Julian glanced up at him again.
That sounds so...
Wrong. Why? Because humans are sentient, and cows, for example, are not. Daemon knew this comparison would get Julian's back up a little.
We're not the same as cows.
Julian scowled. He did not know how the use of the word we showed where his mind was in a lot of ways. Cows feel pain and fear and want only a peaceful place to eat and procreate. Daemon pushed a little more. Don't they deserve that? Julian bit his lip.
Humans are omnivorous. I know there are vegetarians, but humans are made to eat flesh as well as plants.
And vampires are made to eat humans, Daemon pointed out. We cannot subsist on the blood of other creatures on this planet. So I must do certain things to ensure a food source for my people. Julian looked alarmed.
But what does that mean exactly?
We will find out together, in time. Now let us see what name recognition has done for this city in terms of its leadership, Daemon said. The mayor was smiling too broadly, likely from the amount of alcohol he had drunk, which had stained his cheeks a bright red. Even the tip of his chin was red. He mopped his brow where beads of perspiration appeared as he let out a giant belly laugh that rose above even the loud talk in the room. The Kaly vampire, her name was Cara, smiled thinly at whatever he had found so uproariously funny.
Why isn't she running? She sees us coming her way.
Julian asked. I would say that she knows it would do her no good, but Kaly often believe they are too clever to be caught.
Even by you?
Julian lifted his eyebrows. I have become a myth. Those words hurt a little less to say, but even back in the days when I was active, only the very lucky were allowed in Nightfallen, Daemon explained. The immortals had only allowed the best of the best, or most favored fledglings, to come to Nightfallen. Elgar had a permanent home there with Eiros. He had been a familiar figure in the libraries and the palaces, as Eiros had been himself. It would be good to have them both back there, where they belonged.
Meaning that she doesn't know any better.
Julian shook his head in amusement mixed with disbelief.
Maybe news of you turning vampires into mortals with a snap of your fingers hasn't reached her yet.
Or she does not believe it. You would be surprised what people will ignore. They were only 10 feet away from their quarry. She turned towards them. She held a champagne glass that was still half full in both of her hands at waist level. She had delicate, long fingers. There was a band on the right finger of her left hand that had a cluster of pearls and diamonds set in it. A matching set of diamonds and pearls encircled her slim neck in a tight band. She leaned down towards the mayor and whispered in his ear while her eyes were fixed on Daemon. The mayor murmured something back, and his gaze sought out Daemon and Julian as well. He blinked rapidly, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. Daemon was not hiding his otherness from the mayor at that moment. The red eyes seemed to both fascinate and repel the man. There was a faint frown on Julian's face as he studied Cara and the human politician.
I don't like the fact that she's been whispering in his ears about you. Not just now, but from before. She said things, lies, or maybe the truth, but shaded, you know?
He did know. Yes, she has. It will be curious to discover what she said, Daemon replied. And he could have known simply by digging into her mind or the mayor's, but he decided to let his mind just glide over theirs and see where the conversation took them. Cara stepped towards Daemon. Julian stiffened, expecting an attack, but she merely said,
Mayor Battery, these are the two gentlemen I was speaking to you about earlier. May I introduce you to King Daemon and his fledgling, Prince Julian?
Prince Julian?
Julian's nose wrinkled again at that title. Yes, my fledgling. As we have discussed, that is your title. Wear it with pride.
I think she's saying it in a way that sounds like an insult.
Pleasure! Mayor Battery actually sounded pleased, even though his eyes were filled with suspicion and alertness. He extended a hand for Daemon to shake. Daemon merely looked at it, and the mayor dropped it after a moment. With an uncomfortable laugh, the mayor asked, Should, I Bow? I've never met royalty of your type before.
I'm sure the Cali vampires make you bow.
Julian said coldly. His fledgling's normal casualness was replaced by a fierce, beautiful imperiousness. His purple eyes were flecked with glowing red embers, and Julian stood very tall. The mayor actually licked his lips nervously in response as Julian became the vampire prince before his eyes. His fledgling then turned to Cara.
And you should be bowing. There's no excuse for you not to know what to do.
Daemon was surprised and pleased by Julian suddenly being very formal about his rank. But that was just because he saw Cara as an enemy, and not because he suddenly had a love for royalty. Cara's pale eyebrows lifted in faint surprise as well. She knew of Julian's character, and this was not what she had been expecting. She gracefully curtsied to them both. The sweaty mayor bowed awkwardly as well. It was more of a bob of a marionette, but Daemon did not care.
The question that really comes to my mind is why you aren't running, Cara.
Julian asked her the question that he had Daemon earlier. Cara, who just as gracefully rose from her curtsy, asked,
Should I have a reason to run?
Did you check out the Merman series I mentioned? If you want to read more, especially about Amrys, Gabriel's ancestor who tragically lost his human lover, he gets his own story in the Merman 2, House of Air. Amrys has already loved and lost a human, and never intends to open his heart again. But when the mare rulers command Amrys to find other mare-human hybrids, he must walk among them once again. And it's on land where he meets Spencer Long, a hybrid student whose ancestry comes from his family's ancient enemy. He does not wish to experience the pain of losing a lover again, but he can't deny the bond that's starting to form the instant they meet. This Merman sequel is complete, and you can read the entire 48 chapters as a member of my serial site, wraithrain.com. I'll post a link in the notes.
Julian's hands clenched at his sides.
Kaly had my parents killed, and now holds their souls as ransom. You still serve them.
His fledgling's fangs were showing. Daemon sent a calming wave through their bond and touched Julian's lower back. His fledgling eased slightly, but the thoughts of his parents were running rampant again. He understood this. It was agony for his fledgling to think of them in danger.
I have nothing to do with that.
She answered.
And I have no control over their release. I am merely the head of House Quartos.
You serve Kaly.
Julian's voice was tight. She nodded.
They are the head of my bloodline. I can do nothing less.
And some would say you don't even have that.
Julian said. He turned to Daemon.
I'm not the only one here, though, am I?
I cannot speak for others.
Cara said evenly.
But I do not consider myself your enemy. Yet breaking away from the bloodline would not bode well for me or my house. Kaly are not viewed favorably by the other bloodlines. We only have each other.
No. It's just interesting that not only do you remain in the museum tonight, but that you've stayed in this city.
Julian remarked, noting once more the lack of loyalty among the Kaly bloodline. The mayor's eyes went wide, and his head bobbed from side to side as he watched this exchange.
Perhaps not.
She continued to regard him evenly.
I have been told of your character, Prince Julian, and though you have cause to hate the head of my bloodline, I do not think that you will attack me unless I give you cause. I have not.
She was right about Julian's character. Unless she attacked someone he cared about, Julian would not strike at her. He was pleased when his fledgling answered,
Why aren't you hiding in the Everdark? Or were you simply locked out?
Her gaze swung to Daemon, and then she quickly lowered it.
Would there be any point in running from you, King Daemon?
Julian was the one to answer again.
Locked out then. And you are still loyal.
Julian's purple eyes glittered with red fire.
But you're still loyal to Kaly, even when you acknowledge you're being used as a stalling tactic?
There was no way that all of us could get to lasting in time.
She answered, head still lowered. Julian shook his head in disgust.
Leaving us out here to draw King Daemon's ire is a wise move. Perhaps Kaly intends to use us as a stalling tactic.
Cara answered with little emotion in her voice. Julian stared at her with utter shock.
How could you believe?
It is only logical. I can hardly fault Kaly for doing what they must,
she answered. Would it also not be logical then for you to align yourself with me? Daemon asked softly.
It might be if I could expect from you something better than a quick second death,
she answered. Julian's look of outrage was gratifying, even though he had revealed his fledgling a coarser view of humanity in some ways. Kaly did not tell you to fear me, did they? She shook her head.
No, but they showed me the folly and power of the immortals. Your power is far beyond theirs. No one could stop you. And unlike most vampires, I do not seek continued life at any price. I know there is something beyond.
She was speaking the truth. And while Julian still looked like he wanted to sputter at her about how inane her fears were, his fledgling remained silent. Cara has informed me that you've been gone for some time. The mayor awkwardly tried to change the topic. Though why the mayor was not afraid of Cara's dire predictions likely meant he'd heard them before. And what else did she tell you? Daemon spoke for the first time to him, though he was looking at Cara. He hardly listened to the mayor's words, but instead looked into the memory of a meeting Cara and the mayor had earlier in the evening in his office before they'd come to the party.
The greatest of the immortals has returned to us,
Cara had told Mayor Battery. He was seated behind a large burlwood desk, the green-shaded banker's lamp that had been his father's, along with the blotter and fountain pen, was still there as well. He twitched them in surprise. What do you mean? Greater than you? The mayor's forehead bunched. She let out a brief laugh that sounded as brittle as glass breaking.
Yes, Mayor, quite a bit more powerful than me. Even more powerful than Kaly themselves.
She drifted around the room. Her hands lightly reached up to the spines of the many leather-bound books. She did not touch them, but merely hovered her fingers a few millimeters above their embossed spines. The movement, though graceful, was born of agitation, though the mayor would not have guessed it. What does this mean? The mayor looked at her with unexpectedly shrewd eyes.
It means many things, but above all, it means change.
Cara answered him.
I've not met him myself, but it is my understanding that he will have no interest in remaining in the shadows. He will want to rule.
Rule who? The mayor went very still. You? Us?
You make it sound like there's a distinction. I do not think there is in his eyes.
She shrugged as if it didn't matter to her, even though it did.
He was never human, you know. None of the immortals were. But he, above them all, is quite alien.
So you mean he wants to rule humanity as well as vampires? The mayor let out a dry bark of laughter as if he couldn't quite believe she meant that.
Yes, Mayor. Humanity, vampires, immortals, all of us.
She stilled her drifting at the base of his desk and rested her hands on the edge of it. I thought all you vampires agreed that being in the shadows was best. The upheaval. People won't know how to react. There will be chaos. The mayor scoffed. He started sweating then, before alcohol and the press of bodies at the opening.
We agreed, but again, he is not us,
she repeated. Her gaze was laser-like on the mayor's perspiring face.
I have told you some of our history. The immortals used vampires like pawns. They turned humans by the thousands simply to throw them at each other in battle. Daemon, the one I speak of, ruled the other immortals. Imagine what he must be like to do this. Imagine what it would be like to be ruled by a being like that. It would be impossible.
The mayor mopped his brow. Now, look here. I allied with you. We allied with you because you offered peace and prosperity. We all agreed to how it would be. So you need to get this one of you in line. He's one vampire, immortal, whatever. There are far more of you. Do something to stop it.
There is no stopping it,
She said, and her gaze looked distant.
Too many of my kind are already excited by his arrival. All their fear, all the lessons we've been taught, and yet they are eager to meet him. It will spread and spread and spread.
The mayor stared at her silently for long moments. He got up from his desk and pulled down the front of his vest. Then maybe I should be talking to him then, and not you. Cara sighed.
Yes, I see. Maybe you should. I'll introduce you.
When? I don't think we should delay this meeting, the mayor said with a look of disgust at Cara. He was wondering what had happened to her. She was acting so strange.
I think he may come to the benefit tonight. That is what I've been told to expect.
Cara answered softly with no fight in her at all. Daemon snapped out of this memory, and a frown crossed his lips. So you're the man to meet. You're the one that's going to rule all of this, Mayor Battery was saying. There are those of us who have been made aware of the situation and believe we can work together to make things good for both species. And I think I can be of service in this. Daemon hardly acknowledged him, but instead his gaze darted around the room. He sensed danger, but he didn't know where it was coming from. Why had Cara given up so easily? Why was she now so accepting of dying? She was convinced he would give her a second death. She had no doubt, but why?
Daemon, something's wrong.
Julian felt it too. And that was the moment when Cara acted. And Daemon knew what she planned, but it was too late. Seer had always told him that the future was never farther away from her sight than when she was right upon it. It was almost as if, she'd told him, she was looking ahead while just below her the current moment was occurring. Only when it was too large to ignore and too late to stop did it come into focus. He felt one of those moments was upon him now. He had been looking ahead at the time when he would rule with Julian at his side, but he had not looked down at the present moment. People dropped dead all around them. They were talking, drinking, and laughing one moment. The next there was silence, and then the bodies hit the floor like trees felled in a forest. The loudest sounds were the tinkling of glassware and the crash of silver serving platters.
Daemon! Daemon, what's happening?
Julian cried just as the mare keeled over and Julian caught the lifeless body in his arms. She had cut all their souls from their bodies. Daemon moved to gather them up and place them back inside, but the souls were already streaming towards a portal to the next life, the other side. To pull them back now would be to cause immense damage to them. He had to let them go. Any other choice would damn those people to misery. The only sliver of hope amidst all this death was that Zachary and Drew had already left the building before this happened. Julian would never forgive himself if they hadn't. It was the only thing that was stopping Daemon from letting out a roar of rage.
There are certain things worse than death,
Cara said. But these words did not come from her physical lips. Her body was on the floor like all the others. She had cut her own soul out. How long had she been preparing this? It hadn't been just for him, had it? Or had she placed the weakness in these people that she could decide to exploit now? She continued,
I spared them that.
and she too turned to go into the light. But unlike the others that Daemon had worried about harming, he was not worried about her. He grabbed her soul. She gasped, and her head flung back. Her eyes were wide as he pulled her back to him. He formed a soul stone in his left hand. It looked like a diamond, but with a red center. He held it up in front of her. Her eyes widened further. There are things worse than death, he said, his voice arctic, and I will share them with you. Join us next time for episode 104. My blood is your blood.
What else do you get as a member of WraithRain.com besides the unedited, audio versions of Everdark, Dragon's Reign, and The Sexy Times or Empire of Stars. I write a lot of stories. Since 2010, I've written long gay romance web novels with hot heroes falling in love with each other, whether it's honorable elven warriors, fierce dragon shifters, sensual mermen, fallen angels and demons, and reincarnated immortal vampires. When you join, you can read all of these on my serial membership site. The completed stories are there in full for you to read as fast as you want, and the ongoing stories get 3 chapters every week. If this sounds interesting to you, try us out for a month. The link to sign up is in the notes.